All right, hey VC, I'm Jamie. Welcome back. We're back with another video. This time it's fresh finds, and I do like that term, fresh finds, as opposed to recent vinyl or latest pickups. I think I heard fresh finds. I think it was on Eric Weinbender's YouTube channel where he used that term. So I thought it was great. So these are fairly fresh finds now with record stores and record sellers selling again. Although in my area, thrift stores really haven't reopened for the most part. There's maybe like one or two in the area, but like the discount or the thrift stores, those sort of things, or the Salvation Army places, haven't really reopened. So we'll wait and see. So I've got a couple of reissues off the top, and this is part of the Kate Bush remastered or reissue series. These reissues came out in 2018, big massive campaign for that. And so this is one of my favorite albums from 1985, and Hounds of Love. This is such a great album, Running Up That Hill, Hounds of Love, title track, and Cloud Busting. And they've done a nice job with these reissues. I do have an early press of this album, but my copy's not great, so it's really nice to have a reissue of this. And this is on the very interesting Fish People label. Interesting label. And I did pick up this album. This is Kate Bush and the album Ariel. This came out in 2005. This is part of this reissue series from 2018, again on Fish People label. This is a double studio album. Kate Bush had not been recording for quite some time. She took a break from the music industry to raise family and released this album. And the theme for the album is birds, and I think the cover is amazing. When you think it looks like sort of mountains in the distance reflected on the sea there. This is actually the sound wave of a blackbird chirping or singing, or the song of a blackbird is like a sound wave, and then they've superimposed this on the cover. So I think that's pretty cool. So the artwork, is very creative. And as I say, I didn't know much about this album at all, and it is just a terrific listen. If you're a Kate Bush fan, you are absolutely going to enjoy this album. And I love the artwork. It's got a nice big full-size booklet. It features both nice and interesting photography, a nice picture of Kate there, and some interesting photos, and some really interesting artwork through it as well. Those pictures are kind of nice. And what's interesting, though, about this album, when it was first released in 2005, it featured Rolf Harris on a couple of tracks. So when they reissued this, they actually removed Rolf Harris's contribution to it and replaced, I think it was a couple of tracks that he's featured on, and replaced it with Kate Bush's son. So there you go. Okay, we've got more vinyl to show you. Here's Tracy Chapman's first album, and this is an original or early press from 1988 on Elektra. Such a wonderful album. Remember when this came out, and it was such a different sound from everything else you were hearing on the radio or at the time with the 80s and late 80s, all the hair bands, the pop, and then this album comes out, wonderfully folk-tinged album, sparse arrangements for the time, if you will. But just a great album with the tracks talking about a revolution, fast car, and beautiful song, Baby Can I Hold You. Such a nice album. And this one did come with the original sleeve and on the Elektra label. Okay, some Canadian heavy metal. How about the band Killer Dwarfs? This is their second album, Stand Tall. And Killer Dwarfs were kind of part of the second wave of British heavy metal, even though they were a Canadian band. They kind of fit in with that. And they all took the dwarf persona, if you will. Russ Dwarf, Daryl Dwarf, Bad, Ronald Dwarf, and Mike Dwarf. Again, a lot of fun with their music, very tongue-in-cheek, very satirical, but it's fun music to listen to. Again, very 80s heavy metal. And this is on Maze Records, and this does come with the sleeve that is included. Again, a band that just had a lot of fun. Killer Dwarfs. Tonto's Expanding Headband. Don't know too much about this group that features Robert Margouleff and Malcolm Cecil. Early electronic music, very experimental. They also would go on to work with Stevie Wonder on a couple of Stevie Wonder's albums. Now, this is a reissue or repress, not a current one, but one that came out in 1975 of their album Tonto's Expanding Headband Zero Time. So they changed the title of it, changed the artwork, but it's the same album as Zero Time. So I like the artwork on Zero Time actually, but I really do. I'm not a fan of reissuing with different titles and different covers, but in this one I'll make an exception because this artwork's there's a lot going on there. It's very interesting. This on the Atlantic label. You don't often see this. Not maybe always the easiest to find, but I was pretty, and a lot of people don't seem to know too much about it. But some great electronic music from Tonto's Expanding Headband. I love it. Gotta love Joan Jett. How about Bad Reputation from 1981? Feature, of course, the title track. Great Joan Jett rock and roll. And I forgot she did a cover of the song You Don't Own Me on this. So she's always picking like interesting cover songs. And this on the Boardwalk label. Oh, all right. And I don't know if this had an inner sleeve or not, but this one doesn't have one. Okay, we're going to do some Southern rock and roll slash hard rock heavy metal. The band is Blackfoot, and this is Highway Song Blackfoot Live. And yeah, you could put them in the Southern rock kind of category, but they do have a lot more of a kind of a heavy metal hard rock sound to them than, say, some of the other Southern rock bands. And, this is rock and roll from start to finish. And enjoyable, totally enjoyable. And this on the Atco label. Okay, and a folk band, a folk prog band that I've certainly been enjoying is Renaissance. And I was able to pick up a couple Renaissance albums. This is Renaissance, the Carnegie Hall Live, double album with some really nice artwork. Again, very proggy folk with the lead vocals of Ann Haslam. And this, and I think most of these were on the Sire label, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, on Sire. Renaissance. Renaissance Turn of the Cards. I've seen this one presented certainly a few times. A great cover on that one. And the back cover's been, there's been different reissues for the back cover on this. Not radical differences, but again, really enjoyed the sounds of Renaissance. And this one came with a sleeve that's not the original. This is an ABC Dunhill record sleeve, but this would not be the sleeve that went with this album. But it kind of fits, strangely enough, again on Sire Records. Here is a promo copy. This is Renaissance and Novella. Promo copy on this one with a nice gatefold. But yeah, certainly a band worth seeking out. It's a band the more you listen to, the more you will enjoy. And then this album, and I should know how to pronounce that, but I've forgotten how to pronounce it. Sherazad and Other Stories. And this is just an absolute great cover and another great Renaissance album. And this was the inner sleeve. And again on Sire Records. And one more Renaissance album that I did pick up. I also do own the first Renaissance album, but this one from the 80s. Now, of the ones I picked up, this is the one that I've enjoyed the least. This starts to get into really 80s trappings. A number of the band members had left, and as you can see by the back cover, kind of what you're what you're in for. It's not bad, but it's getting into the 80s, shall we say. And this one, again, it's interesting on the IRS label. Okay, so Renaissance there. Doobie Brothers, Living on the Fault Line. Another very solid Doobie Brothers album. This one features a Little Darlin', I Need You. Also, You Belong to Me is featured on this one. As I say, another solid Doobie Brothers album. And this, of course, this has the original inner sleeve. And there are the guys there. And still Tom Johnston with the band, and Michael McDonald with this one, just sort of in those transition years on the Warner Brothers Palm Tree label. I forgot what a great album this was. Doobie Brothers, Captain and Me. Some of the Doobie Brothers stuff that we kind of take for granted, but man, oh man, this is such a good album. When you've got tracks like Long Train Running, which is such a great song that then goes into China Grove. But this one's still in the shrink. Um, and the story with the cover, I guess, certainly they're on the Warner Brothers label, and they were able to get some stuff from the Warner Brothers studios or Warner Brothers lots, so they were able to all dress up and get these horses and everything like that, and take this photo. I guess that's the advantages when you're on a big label that also has movie studios, and again on the Warner Brothers Palm Tree label. And then Doobie Brothers Volume 2, Best of the Doobie Brothers Volume 2. And it's interesting to listen to this. Boy, this is really feels like Michael McDonald fully taking over the sound of the band when you've got so many tracks from Minute by Minute, Real Love, Here to Love You, What a Fool Believes. You know, Volume 1 is terrific. And, you know, these are some great songs, but boy, it really has that sort of different sound to it, much more of that sort of yacht rock sound, for lack of a better term, with Michael McDonald really taking over the sound of the band. Okay, came across this one, was thrilled to pick up this one. I've shown this before, a band that doesn't really get a lot of attention, Box of Frogs. Essentially a Yardbirds spin-off, because it featured Chris Dreja, Jim McCarty, and Paul Samuel Smith as part of the band. And I believe, yeah, Paul Samuel Smith does produce the album as well. But looking on this album, the amount of guest stars on this album is incredible. Rory Gallagher plays lead guitar on a number of tracks. Steve Hackett is also featured on this album. Ian Dury on lead vocals on one of the tracks. And also Jimmy Page is featured on their cover of Heart Full of Soul, which of course a Yardbirds hit. But nice album overall. Also Graham Goldman from 10cc is featured on here. To name just a few, like it's unbelievable the amount of guests on here. And yeah, this is on the Epic label. And Epic. Okay, I got the second Foghat album. That's simply a self-titled album, although with this rock and roll album cover. Again, Foghat, usually you find Foghat pretty reasonably priced in the wild. You know, it's great rock and roll, but and it's interesting, it's their second album, but it was simply called Foghat. It wasn't called rock and roll, but I think it's pretty much referred to that on the great, of course, the great Bearsville label. More Canadian bands. How about Honeymoon Suite? A band that doesn't get a lot of props, but a lot of great rock radio hits, and a great band. This one had Feel It Again, which was a great radio tune. And interesting for this album, as I recall, this one came out in, looks like, I think it was 1980, 85, 86, on the Wea label, produced by Bruce Fairbairn. And this one features, Ian Anderson plays flute on All Along You Knew, that track. And if you're listening to it, you're thinking, gosh, that, and it's interesting because the Honeymoon Suite, the sound doesn't really lend itself to flute, or you wouldn't expect flute in a song. But if you're listening to that track, you think, wow, that really sounds like Ian Anderson. And sure enough, it was Ian Anderson playing flute on that particular track. Again, a great, radio-friendly rock band, Honeymoon Suite. A couple of Steve Earle albums I was able to pick up. Always enjoyed this album. I think I recently showed a CD copy that I've had for years. Was able to pick up a vinyl copy of Guitar Town. Such a great album. The title track, Guitar Town. Hillbilly Highway, Someday. On and on. It's a great early Steve Earle record. And on MCA. And then I was also able to pick up Steve Earle's Copperhead Road, which was such a massive success. And this in the original shrink, sold by the record store Cheapies for $7.99. And it's still in the shrink. And of course, Copperhead Road, the title track, Snake Oil, Devil's Right Hand. When he certainly turned up the volume for this, it was a little bit more rockin', and his early, more country friendly stuff. But and this on the Uni label. Anytime I see the Byrds in the wild for a reasonable price, I'll pick it up. The Byrds, Ballad of Easy Rider, and such a great album when you've got Jesus Is Just All Right, Ballad of Easy Rider. Again, it's the Byrds. You can't go wrong. Every Byrds album is unique and outstanding, and this on the Columbia 2i label. Okay, a band I've definitely been getting into is a band called Outlaws. This is their album Lady in Waiting. And they've got that kind of country rock sound that's happening. This one, a nice gatefold on here. But yeah, some of these, these kind of country rock or southern bands that haven't really had a chance to get exposed to or listen to, and this on the Arista label. Okay, some Saga. Always like picking up Saga. I've got all of their early albums, but this is Heads or Tails, and this was the first time they stopped doing on their early albums. They would have a couple of songs that would have a title, and then in brackets it would be Chapter 3 or Chapter 5. Those songs that were sort of sporadic on their first roughly 4 albums. Had sort of a loose story theme going on. This was the first album then that they released where they abandoned that chapters idea. They would revisit the chapters idea or continue the storyline on later albums. But this one is a Flyer is a great track. That opens up the album. Also, Catwalk got a fair bit of attention and airplay. And yeah, and Scratching the Surface also remains a Saga crowd favorite. Great Canadian band. We're huge in Germany and Europe. And at first I thought this was a blemish, but of course the album's called Heads or Tails, but if you look closely, he is flipping a coin there. And there you go. And the lyrics there. And yeah, on Maze Records, which I believe was, with Maze Records, was the same label with Killer Dwarfs as well. Okay, Alan Parsons Project and Vulture Culture. This is Alan Parsons stuff from the 80s where I was kind of losing track with the band. I really enjoyed like their 70s stuff, their late 70s, early 80s, and then for whatever reason kind of lost track or touch with the band, but still another great Alan Parsons Project album. And I've always been fascinated. You can always pick up Alan Parsons projects generally for pretty reasonably priced, but each album is terrific. Let's Talk About Me, Vulture Culture. Somebody's Out There. Just another great Alan Parsons Project album. And as I say, usually you can find Alan Parsons stuff pretty reasonably priced in the wild. I do like the label on this one. Okay, Harry Nielsen. What a lovely album this is. This is a little touch of Schmilson in the Night. This is an album of all covers, but it's all sort of American standards covers kind of stuff. And he was doing this way before, the Rod Stewarts or so many of them kind of got on that bandwagon before the Michael Bublés. And he does, like, his voice really suits this music. And this, if you haven't had a chance to listen to this, I would definitely give this album a try. This is an early sort of discount reissue on the Best Buy series on the RCA. So I don't know, I can't remember if there's too much or if it was gatefold or anything like that, but it still has all of that on the back. But sometimes for the Best Buys, they scaled them down, but they didn't change them too much. But a great album, like Harry Nielsen, what an underrated singer-songwriter, and this is just it's a beautifully orchestrated album, and the orchestration on this particular album is duly noted because he involves the fellow who worked with Frank Sinatra over the years, Gordon Jenkins. Does the orchestration, so it really has that quality sort of Frank Sinatra or the orchestration that really suits this type of material, and it totally works. Okay, maybe got time for one more. How about Quicksilver Messenger Service? And this is a later album called Solid Silver. I think this is one of the last albums that features kind of the main lineup. Now, this was clearly like a library copy because you kind of got all that, and you got some kind of weird tape thing going on to sort of reinforce it. I don't know if it was radio copy or for like a community radio station or college radio, but always happy to add more Quicksilver Messenger service and this on the capital label. Okay, so that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for dropping by, and we'll chat again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.